my slant on it as well. I've personalised it a little bit. But a guy called Adam Dyer, who runs a church in Yeovil. Thank you, Sam Hext. I was going to say someone in New Wine, but I couldn't remember. And he was running the Impact venue, which was the second venue at New Wine, every morning, and doing some really great teaching. And one of the mornings he did was on giving. And after 25 years of being a Christian, it's the best giving talk I've ever heard. And I went away going, goodness me, I've never heard giving talk like that. I must pass that on to church. So here I am passing it on. Thank you to Tim for allowing me, having not done any preaching course or anything like that, to explain it to you. I work in South Kensington. Most of you might have been there. Probably when you think of South Kensington, you think museums, tourists. There is a definite other side of South Kensington you might not realise, you might. That's opulence, or what I like to call bloomin' rich people. And I walk, cycle, whatever, go through this every day, and it's do you know, it's actually not an easy place to work. It's a tough place to work because I don't like it's not an easy thing to, and you'll find out during this talk. But anyway, I was cycling to work a few weeks ago, and I cycled past a Ferrari. I was like, oh. And you can't help but notice a red Ferrari. It's pretty obvious it's a Ferrari. It's red. It's looking sleek, beautiful. I was like, wow, Ferrari, amazing. But this morning, that's not that unusual for South Kensington, but this morning particularly unusual because about 50 yards up the road was a black and orange Bugatti Veyron. For those of you who want to know a bit more about that, speak to Andy. He probably knows a bit about that car because he likes his cars. But let's just say if a Ferrari is a supercar, a Veyron is a hypercar. The fastest production car in the world, over 250 miles an hour, probably around about £1 million to buy if you could get one. Limited production, so it's probably hard for you to get your hands on one. But it's not a cheap toy. So there's me on my bike, cycling past a Ferrari. 50 yards later, this black and orange Bugatti Veyron. Not my colour choice, by the way, if I'd buy on that car. But anyway, so the Ferrari driver, male, female, doesn't matter. They probably think, I've got a Ferrari. I'm doing pretty well for myself. I think I've made it in life. They're not cheap cars. They're probably about the same price as an average UK flat. So to spend that on a car, that's a lot of money. But he has a problem. If he looks up the road, he's going to see this Bugatti Veyron, which is probably worth 5 times as much as his car. It's not just a little bit more money; it's a ridiculous amount more money. And he's probably going to think, "Oh, maybe I haven't made it quite as much as I thought I had in life." But the Ferrari driver has another option. You see, I'm just going past on my bike, and pretty hard to miss. I've got my bright yellow jacket on from a store that isn't South Kensington Boutique called Go Outdoors. I'm on my pretty nifty steed, my cobalt blue hybrid bike, worth at least a couple of £100 from Evans Cycles. Not too shabby. So this Ferrari driver, he can look up the road at the Bugatti, or he can look down the road at me. If he looks up to the £1 million supercar, what's he going to think? He's actually going to think, oh, I thought I'd made it in life. Oh, actually, that guy up there has made it much more than I have. I haven't. Oh, wow. But if he looks at me, not a bad bike, not going too slowly, don't look too shabby. And I'm not saying I'm in poverty at all. Please don't hear that. But I'm not a Ferrari owner either. And I'm nowhere near a Ferrari owner. So he's got a choice. He can look up the road at the Bugatti, or he can look down the road at me. So here's the issue. So the world teaches us to look up at the Bugatti rather than look down at the bike. So, coming back into Acton. In this room, there is a whole spectrum of realities. Financially rich, financially poor, somewhere in the middle. If you're in a season when you're having to skip meals to feed your children, or if you're having to choose between heating and eating, then perhaps now isn't a time to consider financial giving. Perhaps it's time to consider some other sort of giving to us in terms of time or your talents. So please hear that. Okay. For those of you who did hear the talk, here comes the US survey. So, a study was done in the US recently where people who earned $250,000 were asked if they consider themselves high earners. Not yet, Emma, but get ready. 30% of them didn't consider themselves to be. Another study was done, in the US again, asking a group of millionaires if they thought they were rich. 40% didn't think they were rich. 40%. And the third study was done asking, this time, multi-millionaires. And the wealth range was $25 million net worth to $2 billion. That's 2 with 9 noughts after it, just for those of you that want to know. 9 noughts after it. If they felt financially secure. And over 50% said they didn't feel financially secure. More than half didn't feel financially secure. Just let that sink in for a minute. $25 million to $2 billion net worth. And the interesting thing about this was they asked a follow-up question to that third study, that third group of people who felt not financially secure. So the 50% of that third group that didn't feel financially secure. And they were asked how much more they would think they needed to feel financially secure. And amazingly, across the board, everybody said around about 25% more. So if you think about that numbers-wise, $25 million, they thought they needed about $6 million to feel secure. $1 billion net worth, they thought they needed $250 million more dollars to feel secure. It boggles your mind. So there's 2 conclusions from these stats. The first one is, the more we have, the poorer we feel. Those surveys were steadily increasing in terms of wealth, and the percentages were going up. It also leads to the conclusion that we think that we need about 25% more value, money, pounds, to feel satisfied, to feel financially secure. Whether that's 200 quid in the bank or 2 billion. But most importantly, or secondly and most importantly, it tells us that enough is not an amount. Enough is actually an attitude. It's a perspective and it's a choice. In the words of DJ Fatboy Slim, who some of you might have listened to in the 90s if you like dance music, enough is right here, right now, right here, right now. If we choose it. But it's never here and it's never now if we listen to the messages the world gives us all around us. Because we live in and we celebrate a culture of not enough. It's how our whole marketing culture works and exists. So you might be wondering, how does giving fit into all this kind of enough, not enough? Well, weirdly, giving is the antidote to not enough. It's the cure to not enough. Now, I know that sounds odd. How could giving be a cure to, I haven't got enough, I'll give some away and that's an antidote? It doesn't make sense. But yet often when we do give, it has a freeing effect. It loosens the hold that money can have on us. And God wants us to get into the habit of giving. The first fruits of the harvest, it talks about in the Bible, giving the first fruits. The instinctive reaction to receiving should be to give. God doesn't bless us just to prove how much he loves us. He does do it partly to do that, but he also does it so that we can be a blessing. To make generosity an instinct and a habit. It also says in the Bible about considering the poor. I want to tie this back into the don't look up, don't look at the Bugatti, look down. And that's not please don't think that's in a condescending way. That's looking to realise how much we have. So it's really important to realise how much we do have and not what we don't have. Looking up will just make you feel poor. We are created to be givers by God, But the world teaches us to look at other things, whether that's a car, in my example, whether that's a house, whether that's toys and gadgets, whether that's a more powerful job. And then we end up needing a bigger experience, a bigger toy, a faster car, a promotion at work. And that cycle never stops. We become an insatiable consumer and the complete opposite of what we're created to be, which is to be givers. So to finish on this talk, I want to talk a tiny bit about the feeding of the 5,000. So for those of you who don't know, this is a story of Jesus' talking to a huge following, 5,000, and they get hungry. And one boy offers up his lunch. Now, I'm not sure, and Tim, you may or may not have a theory on this, or anybody else who's a theologian, Lauren here, or Becky McDonald, whether there was only one person there with a lunch. We don't know, I don't think. But he was the only one that offered a lunch. And that's a bit crazy, but that's what happened. And he's not scared of not having enough, because he gives his 5 loaves and his 2 fish, and we understand that that's his lunch. It's not a small part of his lunch. Jesus is omnipotent. Jesus is all-powerful. He could have done this miracle with no food. He could have done this miracle with 1 fish and 1 loaf. But the boy chose to give all of his lunch. And it's important to understand this, because that then means that the boy has to be in need of the miracle in order to be fed. He's got no lunch now. He's put himself in a place of need. So God calls us to receive a blessing and pass it on. He also calls us to partake in the miracles. Do you live in the not enough? Not enough stuff done, perhaps? Not enough sleep had? Not enough money to live properly? Are you looking up at the Bugattis in life? I certainly do, in all of those areas from time to time. This message is as much for me as it is for you. And yet, that is not what God calls us to. He says we are enough. Our God is the God who calls us to be givers and not consumers. When I first heard this talk at New Wine, it really made me stop and think about my attitude to wealth and not enough. It was a wake-up call that made me understand that striving for more is not the solution, that giving is the antidote to not enough, and that I needed to change my habit of looking up, and that I can have freedom through giving. I can have contentment through a change in attitude, that I have enough right here, right now. Now, this is very much a work in progress, I hasten to add, and something that I still have to work on as I eye up a more expensive bike in the bike rack at work, or go past someone in a flashy car. And I also long for, as so many of us do here, to see more of God's work around me here in Acton. And that invitation to be part of God's work is here. We just need to bring our packed lunch.